to this episode of our Wellbeing at Work podcast. My name is Alexandria Bartels. I'm a sales consultant at Workplace Options based out of the UK. And I'm so pleased today to welcome Dr. Yasmin Kaur Malhotra. With a professional doctorate in counseling psychology and expertise in CBT, psychotherapy, EMDR, ACT, and DBT modalities, Dr. Yasmin, as our Director of Child and Adolescent Clinical Care, is a seasoned professional with more than a decade of experience as a senior counseling psychologist. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Yasmin.
Thank you for having me, Alex. It's such an honor to discuss child and family well-being. It's not only an important topic, but a very relevant topic for discussion in today's time. I know me and you have been, discussing all the press releases recently on the critical status of children's mental health, as well as, the theme of parental burnout. So here at WPO, we're very excited about the release of child and family well-being. It's a solution that I strongly believe in. It's so different to our other clinical programs. Mm-hmm. So I'm super excited to share key elements as well as key clinical themes that we're seeing in research, essentially hoping to discuss how we can support families and empower the children of today.
100%. I think there's so many topical topics in there and areas that have become really part of the daily conversation I know I'm having within my personal life, as well as within, the role that we both have within WPO.
Exactly. And I guess for us, it's finding ways that we can meet the need for this population. So looking forward to sharing some insights with you today.
Perfect. Thank you. I think the main area really to start off with is sort of what have we been seeing? What are you observing around the impact that is, we're currently seeing on the mental health of children and youth? What are you seeing there from a sort of more macro level that might have caused, us to reach out and start creating these programs?
Yeah, so of course, when we brainstorm and when we think about providing solutions for employees, we often think about what's happening out there in the real world today. So when I explore relevant research in the field of children's mental health, or when I interact with children in a clinical setting, which of course I have the privilege to do as a psychologist who specializes in those younger years, there are so many powerful trends I have observed that are clearly, impacting those younger generations right now. First, let's talk about the most obvious, which is social media and technology use. We know social media has its pros and cons, right? Now, what we're noting is prolonged use of social media, gaming, or other digital platforms has been linked to a range of mental health difficulties, from anxiety to depression, body image concerns. Well, these are just the beginning. Constant exposure to idealized images and lifestyles online through digital platforms like you've got Instagram, Twitter, you've got Facebook. They often start to make us think about how we look in comparison to others. I've questioned the way I appear, which can seriously impact low, self-esteem. The way we look and present ourselves, it's a pressure that kids and teenagers face, and it's a lot to navigate.
And we're adults and we have those sort of concerns, and now you're a child, and it's coming at you constantly. I think it's a totally different world to when we were growing up. You compared yourself to your school friends. Now you compare yourself to everybody. That changes it.
It does. Images are easily accessible. For example, some platforms are image heavy. So you're constantly looking at how you're appearing to the rest of the world. Of course, along with that, you've got the issue of cyberbullying. The internet, it's big, and it has areas where, bullying is more pervasive and damaging. The things that are said online don't always stay online, and they can follow a young person for much longer, which creates a lasting emotional impact. Now, we know parents are becoming more concerned with how their children are navigating these digital spaces. And of course, as a parent, it's going to trigger feelings of worry.
100%. No one seems to quite know how to deal with it 100%, right? We've never been in this sort of position before.
Yes, exactly. And we have various, organizations that are looking at, certain platforms should have restrictions in place. We should have certain channels that are being monitored. essentially increasing the safety of our younger generations and not depriving them of the advances that technology is bringing, but almost giving that reassurance to parents and guardians that they can feel content and reassured if their children were, exploring such applications on their phones or, of course, on the internet.
I think there's more than, I think that's just one aspect of where we're finding ourselves at the moment when it comes to children's mental health. You mentioned that you've observed some other areas.
Yes, of course. Another common one for discussion is the impact of the pandemic, which now feels like it was so long ago. The disruptions caused by COVID-19 were huge. They caused isolation, there were changes in routine, and of course the uncertainty that came with the pandemic really took a toll on children, triggering health anxiety in many and various other mental health difficulties. When it comes to health anxiety, we were repeatedly told to wash our hands a certain number of times, to keep our faces covered and to keep a distance from others. So it often triggered thoughts and behaviors that we weren't previously aware of.
Yeah, almost the opposite of what children should be doing.
Yes, exactly. It's the last thing you should be conscious about, right? Yeah. When you're in that academic environment or you're trying to thrive as a child or a teenager, how, you're dealing with these behaviors, it feels out of the ordinary. And it did in that moment, not only for children, but also for adults.
Yeah. And that knock-on effect, I think we're still feeling today, again, in so many different ways. We can see there's children struggling to almost go back to being children, to learning how to integrate and to share space with others.
Yes, it's a huge transition. It was a huge transition, and it still is for some. We know at the time, remote learning, while it was necessary, it created significant challenges. There were learning gaps. There were, feelings of isolation for many students. There were students who'd come from international and overseas, who were, separated from families for prolonged periods. And when children or teenagers or young people finally returned to the classroom, it did feel overwhelming. At the time, I know, it was all over the news. Some were awarded predicted grades and not really offered the chance to sit their exams, which really affected their ability to get into colleges or universities that they'd always, looked forward to, which impacted confidence and morale.
Yeah, the knock-on effects, I don't even think we know all of them yet. They're still sort of unfolding, right? And that also not just for the child, but also the family as a whole. That's sort of those stresses that parents felt, probably trying to look after their children as best they could, but under their own stresses as well.
Yeah, of course. Parents were also under pressure on trying to find a solution, essentially, saving their child's future or reassuring them, because children were presenting with a sense of hopelessness. And so parents were having to step up and to really support and provide that emotional guidance in such a difficult time. And then we also know that some kids, even today, are struggling to get back into school, and parents are facing that added pressure of having to liaise with educational departments and also ensuring that their children are not falling behind in terms of, meeting those key developmental milestones that they should be.
Yeah, like you mentioned a bit earlier, that's a seismic shift, and so not just now, but kind of what will happen, what their lives will be like, and what the experiences they'll have ongoing. It's not a one and done. It's an ongoing sort of unraveling of what maybe they believed they were going to be having in their future and how that has fundamentally shifted.
Yes, of course. When it comes to education, we have certain sort of levels we go through. You have your GCSEs, you have your A levels, and then you're sort of working towards university or college or an apprenticeship. And when you're sort of taken off that plan, it can feel anxiety provoking because it's all you've ever known. Yeah. So we know today there is substantial academic pressure. Students today are feeling the pressure to perform really well, to engage in extracurricular activities so they can secure that spot in a good university or a college. So there's this constant push to excel, which can lead to stress, burnout, and of course there are some traits of perfectionism that are floating around as a result.
Right, got you. What are some of the other trends that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, we can't ignore the pressure on families, right, Alex?
Yeah.
And, there's been changes in family structure after COVID and the last few years, given the various challenges that the globe has faced. We've seen sort of themes around parents separating. There are various financial challenges that families are having to deal with. The UK is a key region in the world where we're seeing, the last few days, the new budget that was released, and tax going up, and it's creating so much emotional distress amongst families. And we know an unstable or unsettled home environment makes it even harder for children to cope with their emotions, and it can create, lasting long-term mental health challenges. So parents are having to figure out financial, struggles, as well as ensuring their children are okay.
Yeah, and that just that alone is a full-time job, and draining on all levels. I think there's the change in finance. I know we've got it at the moment in the UK with, as you were saying, the budget and some of those offers of support from the government and local councils. There's so much change there that a lot of children will have very different support structures going forward. Some of them will fall away, some of them won't be available anymore. That's a huge stressor, and again, another change for children and kind of their journey.
Yeah, exactly. And no journey is the same, right? And there's so much happening in real time. We're moving so quickly, and it's trying to adapt and trying to manage all those challenges that might come your way. I mean, eco-anxiety, that's another one. We've got climate change, we've got environmental issues which, dominate the news. So the younger generations are more and more concerned about the future of the planet. And it's a new form of anxiety that we're seeing, this fear about the environment and feelings of helplessness about what the future holds. So, young people are more conscious of themes like natural disasters. You've got the wildfires in the States that happened. And sadly, these events are triggering worries and in some areas tangible trauma, which young people and families have to navigate through.
Yeah. And, eco-anxiety and those are real things that are actually happening. They're not always happening, across the sea somewhere else. There's more and more children having to go through these experiences as well. So it's not just worrying about them, they're actually experiencing them too.
Yeah, and they have to sort of deal with the impact of those, right? And if they're in those regions, it's trying to understand the toll it's taken on you and your well-being. But even at a distance, when we're watching the news, we feel connected to these areas and these parts of the world. When I sort of work clinically with the youth of today, another challenging aspect I see is identity formation. Adolescence is such a critical time for self-discovery, but it's also a time when kids face so much pressure to conform. You're navigating friendships, you're dealing with romantic relationships, and then there's personal identity. So when it comes to elements like gender, sexual orientation, or even cultural identity, it can feel emotionally taxing. These pressures can create confusion and distress. It can make it, harder for kids to understand who they really are. I mean, me and you were recently discussing that trending Netflix show, Adolescence, which really gives a real picture of these dynamics coming to effect. I mean, Parliament's now discussing showing it in various schools across the UK.
Yeah. I've had a couple of clients over this week and last week talk about it as well. It's become very much in the front of people's minds about how there is so much going on that some parents are just not aware of. And then the ones that do become aware of it, what do I do with this now? How do I deal with this better or differently? And if there is issues already, where do I go? Who can help me? I think it's bringing up a real good, it's a good conversation to have, but scary within society.
Yeah, I mean, like you've said, it's triggered so many different thoughts amongst parents, right? If a conversation like that needs to happen with my child, like you said, where do I start? How do I recognize the signs that my child might be struggling? And also this whole new world of language through emojis and images and the power they hold. It's like language that, I'm not as familiar with. I don't know about you.
I looked at that and I had no idea. I mean, I'm quite lucky in a way because my children are now in their late 20s, but I have friends with, teenagers, etc., and they literally have no idea what their children are talking about because of the emojis. It makes no sense whatsoever. And that in itself is fear for a parent.
Yeah. I mean, it's just understanding that the younger generations are expressing in ways that you and I might not be familiar with, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it's also increased the desire to know more as parents, as guardians, wanting to know what can I spot, but it's just remembering not to create that added pressure on yourselves. And I think just being available, that's the biggest starting point, Alex, is just reassuring your children that you are there, to have that conversation and maybe facilitating times for communication, whether it's sitting and having dinner together on the table and allowing that space where you're not distracted by your phones or your laptops.
Yeah, it seems really simple when you say that, as in, that's something that can be done. But referring back to some of the points that we made earlier, with the intensity of the world that we live in at the moment, from both parents needing to be at work, multiple jobs, long hours, financial issues, pressure on a parent to now be the best parent that they can. And, let's all sit around the dinner table and have a conversation. It sounds easy, but incredibly hard for a lot of people to be able to create that environment.
Yeah, it is tough. It's not as easy as said, right? And also maybe even modeling what healthy communication. If mum and dad can be more vocal about what they're thinking, feeling. If a job is creating stress, I'm feeling really stressed today, because it's about all needs. The child's need is important, but so is the parents, because essentially, like you said, they're going above and beyond to provide, to perform at work, and to keep the family together. So it's just ensuring that everyone's checking in with themselves. But on a positive note, we're seeing growing awareness of mental health, especially amongst our youth. They're speaking more about their struggles, and they're trying to advocate the importance of well-being. You see various blogs and podcasts, as well as sort of, self-help journals that have been trending in the market. It's better than what it was before, and I'm talking, looking at the older generations. But it shows that we still need to work on this, because we know resources are limited. There are underserved areas where access to mental health support can be a real challenge. So it's a tough time for kids and parents all around, but there's so much more we can do.
It's new skills that we all have to learn. New ways of approaching parenting, conversations, etc. Very different to, as you say, different generations. All somehow done it differently, and now we've got this particular new way of being that I think is just exploding and needs the support. So that's sort of, I would say, sort of the global picture, if I can put it that, sort of the macro level. Are there some regional differences? We want to support individuals globally. So for us, it's really important to understand the nuances of different parts of the world. Are there differences in what we've spoken about depending on where you live?
Yeah, of course there is. And I'll do a bit of a deep dive for you, Alex. I mean, here at WPO, we pay very close attention to our data. So what I've been noticing across different regions, there are some interesting shifts happening. So for example, according to the Children's Commissioner, around 400,000 children, so that's around 3% of all children in the UK, are seeking support from health services for, suspected neurodevelopmental conditions. And across our program, our data highlights similar observations. So we're actually noticing an increase in parents reaching out for support for their children with needs of this nature. Specifically around ADHD and autism. What's great is there is growing awareness, and there is this openness to understanding these conditions, and more families are seeking guidance on how they can navigate any challenges that might be present. For example, it might be, developing effective communication strategies, or even social skills building so their child can thrive in that school environment. But this also really highlights that, local government funded services and systems have failed to keep up with this demand. So many families are feeling, lost. They're expected to cope by themselves until they wait. We know CAMHS in the UK has really, really big waiting lists. You're looking at 3 to 4 years for initial appointment. Now, our program sort of seeks to fill this gap. We, want to support the family in finding a route that meets the needs of that family, whether this is connecting them to a professional who can provide a diagnosis. And we know a diagnosis can, allows your child to have extra support in that school environment. Or even some families are struggling to come to terms with the fact that a diagnosis might be required. So we've referred families for family counselling to come to terms together as that family unit. And then we also know, some children with neurodiverse needs struggle to manage some of the symptoms and might feel the added pressure to try and fit in. So we have referred children for their own one-to-one therapy where they can explore these challenges.
Amazing. I think that's, as you said, those sort of waiting lists just don't make sense. We can't do that. We can't wait that long. People need immediate support before potentially it could get worse. So I think that the ability to be able to reach out and have support on all those different levels. It's not, we're sort of not having the blinkers on that it's, okay, we've just got to look after the child that's, potentially diagnosed, with a specific condition. It's understanding that it's a family situation.
Yes, exactly. And for us at WPO, it's that power of that conversation.
Yeah.
It's trying to understand what difficulties are occurring and what we can do to try to help the well-being of that family, the child and the parents involved. A diagnosis can provide many answers, but also we need to equip parents with the resources and the education to really understand and recognize the symptoms that are present, and also support the children, and teenagers in developing coping mechanisms that they can actually put into practice.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that, again, going back to what we were saying earlier, there's no handbook for this. It's all new.
Yeah.
It's not something that we've got a lot of experience with as parents. And so all of this becomes critical to be able to have that education. What else do you see? We've spoken sort of UK. Are there other areas?
Yeah, so over in LATAM, we're sadly observing, a rise in self-harm sort of behaviors and tendencies. It's really heartbreaking to see how much the pandemic has impacted mental health in this region. It is one of our most utilized regions in the world, so it's great to see that parents, are reaching out to get that access for their child. And we know that this part of the world lacks effective services in children's mental health. For example, I read a paper a few years ago. UNICEF reported that across Latin America and the Caribbean, I think around 16 million minors between the ages of 10 and 19 live with a mental health condition, and public healthcare systems were noted to be underfunded and overwhelmed, which is really sad to see. Now, our program in that moment provides that access to care that these families are actually struggling to receive amongst and across their local communities.
Right. And I can't imagine that would have got better, in the last couple of years, especially since COVID.
Yeah, funding is a recurrent topic we keep speaking about across the globe when it comes to, the crisis on children's mental health. And then it's, parents were having to find a way forward for this child. It's trying to find, make the most of the resources they have access to. And the beauty of us at WPO is we provide services not only in person, but through video, through telephonically. We have sort of training events and webinars we can release to parents and guardians. So there's always something we can offer.
Right. And in these sort of situations, it feels like anything is helpful, right? Any sort of learning or any sort of, even just understanding you're not alone probably makes the biggest difference here as well.
Yeah, it's reassuring them that what you're recognizing, that there's some validity to it, that if, you're noticing your child's struggling or you're struggling, we hear you and what can we do about it? Even as a parent to disclose that your child is struggling, it takes a lot of courage, right? And it takes a lot of sort of almost having faith in a system that there'll be something that I can gain. And for us, it's meeting that need wherever it might be required across the world.
100%. What about APAC? Anything specific there?
Yeah, in APAC, a lot of parents and guardians are expressing concerns to us regarding, their children struggling with academic challenges, and also sort of challenges with peer relationships. So there's a real worry about their children not fitting in or struggling to adjust socially, especially in those school environments. It's a big topic of discussion amongst families in APAC. So what we're doing on our side is we're not only educating families on the value of the therapeutic interventions over just medical models, which are actually quite common across this part of the world. We also note that awareness is growing, which is so fantastic to see. I mean, last year around September, I had the privilege of interacting with employees at a few roadshows in Bangalore, India, and there was this real eagerness to learn about the positive impact of therapeutic models, which, could help in areas such as emotional well-being, your cognitive development, and social skills. So it was very reassuring to see that areas which have some stigma and taboo present, we're sort of stepping out of that mindset, and we're embracing, or we're more open to understanding what this well-being framework looks like.
Do you think that sometimes it's easier for parents to almost ask for help for their children rather than themselves? It feels like that would be an easier sort of entry than maybe saying that I'm struggling. It's easier to say, can you help my child?
Yeah, we do note that. Yeah. We note some parents who just want the referrer for the child, and then hope the therapist can, conduct meaningful work and the child will progress. Mm-hmm. But for us, it's essentially, giving parents the tools. So then when the child leaves the therapy and goes back to the family home, parents can guide and reinforce any new skills that the child might have picked up. So where parents are a bit of a distance, in that case, we have our pediatric case managers at WPO who will interact with parents whilst the child might engage with the one-to-one intervention. Ooh. So it creates that space where, parents can ask questions and we can really deepen their insights as to what might be going on.
Yeah, incredible to be able to give that really rounded support, and not, again, like I was saying earlier, that sort of, I've got my blinkers on and I'm only looking at one aspect of this. It's, again, bringing in that family aspect to it. And the Middle East, I know that's a whole new area as well, from being able to support emotionally in general with EAPs. How are you finding that from a child and family support?
Yeah, so I mean, the Middle East, we're seeing an interesting shift. We're noting that parents are becoming more curious about how to understand and actually support their child's well-being. There's a balance they're trying to find between seeking specialist diagnostic tests and actually exploring more holistic approaches to mental health and well-being. So leaning towards that whole person-centered approach, which we advocate for at WPO. And we're very curious with this part of the world, given local legislation is encouraging parent-friendly working environments, which challenges any stigma or taboos surrounding mental health. Now, we know research has shown that some elements of this taboo and stigma is still present in some households across both MEA and APAC. But we're trying to get as involved as possible in local community events so we can really evidence that our solution meets a need in this region. We've been discussing and mapping out the Arab Child Summit. This is just one example. So we can actually interact with the population out there, understand their help-seeking behavior, but also, again, advocate the importance of children and parental well-being.
Amazing. I think that must be quite empowering for you to sort of feel that you're part of that conversation and can really steer the way that this starts sort of rolling out and the changes that can come from it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's trying to be curious in our approach, right? It's understanding the beauty of culture. It's understanding culture impacts how we behave. It impacts how we see mental well-being. And it's trying to be a part of something which brings value to the population in that part of the world. The trends that we've sort of discussed now show that, mental health challenges are taking on various forms in all these regions. And so, we need to continue paying close attention to that live data so we identify the right approaches that encompass the values of those cultures so employees are supported in ways that are important to them.
Right, that meaningful to them, to their region, to their culture, etc.
Yeah.
I think
exactly.
we've spoken quite a bit now around the context that we find ourselves in. If we can sort of shift a little bit now, can you talk about the program a little bit? Give me an idea of, you mentioned some of the elements of it, but maybe just a bit more of detail around What is the program? What are we talking about?
Yeah, this is my favorite question, Alex. I mean, I could sit here all day speaking about child and family well-being. So I'll try to, give a key summary, but really explain the story that led to the development of the program. Now, I see so much value in this program, especially because it addresses a significant gap in the support that is available to children and families today. As you know, Alex, I live in a very remote location where sadly, children here are very limited to well-being support. Parents are having to pay substantial amounts for private services, which they may or may not be able to afford, but the pressure is there to find some form of treatment for their child who might be in a lot of distress.
Oh.
Now, what sets us apart is we're the first to provide a solution on a global platform. So right now, our program, Child and Family Wellbeing, is live in over 65 countries. We also offer services in local languages, and I think that's really, really important because that establishes comfort right from the beginning. And it also shows that we appreciate the beauty of difference and diversity. Now, we understand that cultural norms play a huge role in how families approach mental health. So we've integrated those elements and that lens of understanding into the services that we offer. And by doing this, we ensure that our approach is not only effective, but also, respectful and relevant to the needs of each community that we serve in. As we've been talking today, Alex, it's no secret that parenting today is very challenging and it's not getting any easier. Now, the mental health challenges across children are growing rapidly. In fact, when we look at specific stats, I believe over 1 in 5 children globally are estimated to deal with a diagnosable mental health condition like depression or anxiety today. And what's shocking...
That's frightening. That's frightening.
It is. But it's the real world that we're living in right now. And around 2/3 of mental health disorders actually begin by the age of 14. And what we recognize is that it's not just impacting, the children of today, but it's also taking that toll on their parents. Now, we know that 1/3 of parents actually experience mental health challenges of their own. And over half of them say that they find it difficult to balance the demands of work with the stress of their child's mental health alongside their own difficulties that they're experiencing internally. So it's a very complex picture we're working with. But essentially, Alex, we recognize the urgency of addressing this mental health crisis. So our mission really is to empower parents and guardians by giving them the resources or the tools that they might need so that they can attend to their child's emotional or developmental needs. We also know that, taking that first step can feel really overwhelming. Like I mentioned, where I live and there's a lack of resources or services. Well, where do you start? There are so many options to explore. You've got a range of therapies that exist today.
And you're not, as a parent, you're not the expert. That you're at the best of whatever you can find, I suppose, and what's available and what you can pay for.
The needs are so different from one family to the other. But our program is designed and keeps those working parents in mind. So we strive to really ease that pressure, that parental stress. We want to strengthen, stronger family cohesion. So we believe in systemic interventions and ultimately improve that overall quality of life for both parents and their children. So we want to provide the support when it's needed. Like you said earlier, Alex, sometimes it's often way delayed where symptoms can become quite chronic. But it's catching things as they're happening in real time so parents can perform better in the workplace and in other areas of their life.
Yeah. There's that saying, happy wife, happy life. But I think it can also relate to this. If you've got parents that are feeling supported and, educated on a particular subject around whatever their child is going through, it just really does make a huge difference to the overall outcome, how they can then approach it, their confidence in approaching it. And also, I think it gives them also the confidence to speak up for their child as well, right? To demand that they get more support or fight to get the support that they need from their local practice or whatever it is that they need to approach.
Yeah, it's also validating their concerns and their difficulties, because it's not easy, and we're trying to simplify it as much as we can, but also give them the space to really release the pressures that they're facing. So sometimes we have parents that give us a call and they just want to, really express the emotional toll that some of these difficulties is taking on them as a parent. So, with us, our pediatric assessments, they will really help a parent understand what type of intervention is required. Sometimes it's mum and dad that need their own EAP support, their own individual counselling to work through that stress or that added pressure. Or if we know a family struggling with communication, or family counselling. And then, of course, there's the one-to-one options. We've got a range of specialist therapies for the child. So we want to ensure that the path forward is clear and it's tailored to that family's specific needs and situation.
When you say child, I think also, especially when it comes to a child accessing support, what does that look like? Like, what age are we talking about? Because, as you said, some of these situations, diagnoses, sort of worries, I suppose, can start really, really young. Where can we step in? Where can we start supporting? Where does our area of expertise sort of start?
Yeah, so we can come on board from the ages of 3 and above. So really coming in as early as we can, and it's also understanding when that child would feel motivated and ready to pursue the one-to-one therapy. So one-to-one therapy we encourage from 6 and above, but from 3 onwards we could look at family counselling, we could look at care coach support for parents and guardians. So and also we've got couples counselling for mum and dad. So for us it's having various support mechanisms under those age brackets, and this is what's so different from our standard EAP model. The specialist routes that we have, the specialist therapies, as well as that care coach element, it's unique to this program only.
From what I think employers would understand of programs that we champion around the world, this is fundamentally different to this is counselling. This is just so much more than that on all different levels.
It is. And we have, unique child-specific outcome measures where we can evidence the success of an intervention to a family, which we don't really have in our standard EAP model. So that this program is really well thought out. Is again ensuring that when a parent calls in, there is some form of support that we can offer.
What's the genesis story of this? Where did this start for WPO? Where did sort of moment come that we realized this needed to be created?
Yes. So, a few years ago, we had a really big client of ours, we work very closely, with, and they at that time recognized that parental well-being was a big concern across their, organization. And they felt we were the ones that could offer a customized solution that would meet the needs of their employees. So we had that program, which is still running today, which was in effect for, I think, 2 years before we realized actually we have touched so many families across the globe and supported so many parents, and the feedback and that customer experience was so positive that we felt we want to release this to the rest of our market. And, last year we opened our books of this to the rest of our books of business, and the name itself encompasses what it provides, which is support for the child as well as the family.
Got you. Yeah, I think that's the part of WPO that I love, is very much that when we learn and see something working, we want to be able to spread that to as many other potential clients and families and individuals as possible.
Yes, and we also, and you might have noticed this as well, Alex, we had, many organizations and companies across the globe asking us, well, what are you doing about this mental health crisis, about parental well-being and parental burnout? So it definitely is a solution that really responds to the concerns of today's population.
Wonderful. Can you, and I think we've sort of mentioned lots of elements of need. Are there some stories, or is there anything particularly that you can give as an example of where you've seen this work beautifully?
Yes, of course. There are so many stories that I'd love to share, but I'll try to be a bit more specific. I think today, Alex, compared to 30 years ago, we're more aware of children's emotional and psychological needs, right?
Right.
I have to say that there's a lot of great parenting out there. Many parents are actually very attentive, but at the same time, young people are very vulnerable in today's day and age because of how much information there is to begin with out there as to what constitutes good mental health. But one thing we've constantly done is we've supported parents in understanding how to best approach their child's sign of distress. So many times we've had parents call in where they don't know where to begin or how to, hold that conversation, and that's where we step in. One key topic that keeps coming up for us is behavioral challenges. So parents can often feel very overwhelmed, especially when they want their children to perform well at school. But what I want to say is, disruptive behavior, it's a sign of something deeper. It could be an emotional struggle or it could be an unmet need. And a lot of parents don't always recognize that. But we work with them to provide the tools and the strategies so they can, really manage any behavioral challenges that are occurring, but in a way that's supportive. And also, ensuring they have the tools to support any unmet needs.
So fundamentally different, I think, to the sort of the previous generations. So again, it's being able to support parents with this new way of understanding.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It is. It's trying to be curious and trying to deepen your understanding as to what is actually occurring, behind the scenes with my child. There has to be a reason why they're behaving in these ways. So essentially for us, behavioral challenges is a really common one we keep seeing day in, day out, as well as children struggling to manage adjustment and change. So this could be shifting from primary to secondary school, or, parents relocating to a different area, or even the family structure shifting. So you might have parents separating, the loss of a family member, various things. But, it's essentially trying to again, recognize what the ask is when that parent calls in, and helping them understand, again, what's leading up to that behavior and then finding a solution for it.
Right. And I think to sort of turn this around a little bit as well, we've spoken about that being the stress on the family, on the individual parents. These parents are all employees, right? They're all having to get up and go to work every day and do what they need to do to support their family. If I was an employer listening to this today, what do you think the message you would give to that employer? How would you want to reach out to them and have them understand the benefits and the importance of this program?
Yeah, I mean, offering a program like Child and Family Wellbeing to your employees, it can bring so many benefits for organizations. For example, I read another article from The Economist, which actually highlighted that over half of working parents in the US feel that managing their child's wellbeing impacts their ability to work. And now while 85%, I think it was, of parents recognize the importance of talking about their child's mental health with their employers, less than 25% actually take that step. And I kind of understand that. Sometimes we feel we want to separate our personal life from working life. And it might not feel like the right space to be sharing, how your family might be, or what your family might be dealing with, or what your child might be experiencing. In the UK, there was a poll commissioned by Working Families and Bright Horizons that actually found 2 in 5 working parents of children under 18 wish that they had more mental health support in the workplace. So actually employees are asking for this type of support. And these numbers and stats that I've just shared in those 2 articles clearly show a need for change, right, Alex? And this is where a program like ours, as part of an EAP really shines. It normalizes help-seeking behavior when families face such challenges. Parents are reassured that, there's confidentiality, that what they're disclosing, won't be shared with the employer, which actually encourages them to reach out for support. Some employees prefer to keep personal family matters separate from work, and that's okay. And the benefits go beyond just supporting the employee, it also has a really big impact on retention and job satisfaction. So when employees feel that their company cares about their personal lives, including family well-being, it builds trust, loyalty, and it essentially creates that positive work culture. It can help reduce stress, burnout. And we also know that, employees who feel supported in these ways are more likely to maintain a healthier work-life balance. So better productivity overall. We see employees that are more engaged, focused. It can reduce absenteeism. I know, recently in the last few years, we're seeing the days of PTO that have been taken rising year on year. So at the end of the day, if organizations invest in the holistic well-being of their employees, they're actually building a more resilient and sustainable workforce. So it's a win-win for both the employee and the company.
Perfect. I think I have conversations on a daily basis with employers, with the HR teams, etc., and the well-being managers, and they're just trying to find out how can we really support in ways that are meaningful, that are actually going to go above and beyond sort of almost a tick box exercise, with support. And some a program like this, I think, even if you feel it's not for you, you never know where you're going to end up. And so these are the elements that, as an employee, exactly like you say, you feel, okay, I'm being listened to, or, there's some level of thought being given to my well-being. And that, as you say, that really sort of cements that relationship, I think, with the employee-employer. So is there any last sort of words or comments before we wrap up?
Yes, of course, Alex. So, I mean, when we focus on the well-being of both children and parents, especially when it comes to balancing work and family life, we're not just helping families thrive, Alex. We're actually building a healthier and more resilient society. And I feel supporting parents and kids today has that ripple effect. It strengthens communities. It helps create a brighter future for everyone. So by investing in parental well-being, we're giving these individuals the ability to be more present and productive at work, which benefits everyone in the long run. So this isn't just about changing individual lives. It's about shaping that stronger, supportive future for the generations to come. And of course, as always, Alex, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today, and I'm sure we'll continue these conversations.
Definitely. I love it when you speak to clients. I can see your passion, and you can see sort of light bulbs going off in their heads as well. So it's always a pleasure. I love your closing thought there around that sort of society, that societal kind of, everybody's being swept up in this. Everybody gets to benefit from it. That, I think that's critical in everything that we've been saying today. We need to support society. We're all part of it. And this is just one step.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much. So in conclusion, if anybody listening would like to know more about the Child and Family Wellbeing Program for your employees, please contact your WPO representative. You can email us. We've got an email, service@workplaceoptions.com, where we can share more information. There's also contact details that will be posted on this page. Dr. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of our Wellbeing at Work podcast. To our listeners, we hope you have found this conversation insightful. Stay safe and well.